Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to a code Q&A stream where you've got questions and I might have answers. Glad to have you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for stopping by on this wonderful Friday. Yeah, if you want to ask some questions, you can use chat commands. So exclamation mark ask followed by your question, and that question will then show up on this website. After it's there, other people can upvote your question in the chat with exclamation mark upvote followed by the question number. That's pretty much it. So if you have a question, put it there because it'll be a whole lot easier for me to see it versus just asking the question in the chat. All right, I'm here. It's a slow start. Thank you for all the supports, everyone. Salentes with the 5-month Prime resub, Danielle with the 9-month resub, Nookie Poo with 100 bits, Java Grunt with 100 bits, Nookie Poo with that gifted sub. Thank you for the support, Nookie Poo. And Nessie with the 13 months of Prime. Very good. Very good. I think these switches are brown. They're whatever came with it. I didn't swap them out. What now? Let's all drop. Type exclamation mark drop me in the chat. And your avatar will fall from the sky just like that. And if it lands in the garden, get your name on the screen. I missed. Who's that? It's Nookie Poo. Great drop, Nookie Poo. Well, who's that? Came in like a rocket. Dynamic Voyage. Great work, everyone. Great work. Something just happened. Yaten Exiazilimchi. Yaten Exiazilimchi. Thank you for the Prime sub. And what's up, S.Code? Today we're going to be answering questions. And I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Okay. There's a lot of newbies today. Let's say hi to all the newbies. First timers. Any first timers in chat? Just say hello. I will acknowledge you. Code Kenzie. What's up? What's up, Sane? And Tectonic. And Mr. Enclose. And Maroof. And Anroy Paul. Welcome to the show. Glad we could have you here at the Coding Garden. All right, let's say hi to everybody and then we'll answer some questions. But get your questions ready. Exclamation mark ask in the chat. They'll show up here. And also try to ask me questions that will require me to answer by writing code, because I want to write some code, not just talk for a while. But yeah, okay. In the chat, if you use any of these words, hi, hello, hey, morning, afternoon, evening, good day, howdy, coding, hi-oh, boga hey, any of these, I'll see your message and I will notice you. I will acknowledge you. First person to say hello was King Coding. What's up, King Coding? It says, hope you're doing great. I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. What's up, Slake? And Abdu. And Excavator. Hello, Coding Garden fan. And Koda Kenzie. And Tim. And Roaming. Hello, Sound of Gaming. And Tech Turner. And Two Fox. And Limitless. And the Oxd. And David. And Sir Davos. And Padster. Hello, Yash. And Nookie Poo. And thank you, and Roy Paul, for that Prime sub. What's up, P10 Designs, and I'm Yeti, and Username, and Guarav, and Rainy Bisun. Hello, what's up, Cesar, and Maroof, and Depopam, and Shahamsam from Sri Lanka. Welcome. And Cypher, hello. Says, can we talk and have a code example of microservices or something with GraphQL? Maybe. Ask it on here. I'll say that I don't have a lot of professional experience with either of those things, but we could do just like a basic introduction to them because I can do that. And what's up, Henrique and Zamar and Yaten? Thanks again for that sub. What's up, Marco and Dynamic Voyage and Enroy Paul and Archie and Void and King Rapula and The Art of Missy? Hello. What's up, Sequel Gordster and The Name Solo, first timer? Thanks for being here. What's up, Alka and Ashley B? Howdy. What's up, Danielle and Kali and Abu and Jamro and Mubash from Pakistan? Welcome. What's up, Silver Designs and Noxy Boy and Storm and Shebsa? Long time. I'm glad you could be here. And my summer's been all right. Yeah. And Greg, 16 months. That's so long. Thank you, Greg, for the support. Tactical Spartix. How's it going? What's up, Duke Twitch? And Pastricence? Pack. What's up, Pack from Nepal? And Keeg. Boga hey. What's up, Jim McDonald? And Katoli. And I'm Khan and Levi. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. Did anything else happen? That was it. Yeah, here's the chat commands to ask a question. Let's go. I'm off today. I'm really off today. Let's go. First question from Nookie Poo. Fastify or Express? My answer is Express just because I'm so used to it, but Fastify seems fine. And it's fast. But I'll say this. I have never written an app with Express that I wanted to be faster. So Express is fast enough. But if you look at Fastify, it is another way to build APIs. Let's just look at their... do we have a getting started? Why? Core feature? Quick start. Okay, yeah. So install it, specify a route. Your methods can be async and they can return whatever you want your request handler to respond with, which is nice. You don't have to do like res.send or res.json. Well, that's cool. Seems fine. But there's just a whole lot of Express out there in the world. So I still just use Express. How important is big O notation to get a job in web dev? Is it something that someone is expected to know for a junior developer role? It depends. It depends on where you're being interviewed, what kind of company it is, that kind of thing. But I will say it can't hurt because in general, when you start to learn about big O notation, you start to learn about runtime complexity and how the complexity of your algorithm or how the runtime of your algorithm grows depending on the input, which is a pretty important concept. I mean, we don't use it that much in web dev, but if you know these things, you can potentially build faster things because you're not doing a lot of extra work, or you're doing things in a smarter way. So I think it's worth it to know. It really depends on where you're going to be interviewing on whether or not they ask about it. Oh, really? Yes, Greg. Oh, really? Do I have any recommendation for web projects? Yeah, I mean, if you haven't heard from Florin Pop has project ideas repo, and it's really good, really good. One of the best. I'm trying to find GitHub. This one. No, that's not it either. Let's ask Google. This one. So this repo has a ton of project ideas, but the super cool thing about it is if you go into any one of these ideas, they have also specified some user stories, bonus features, examples, and useful links. Like every single one of these project ideas has that. So it's a great jumping off point. So check that out. Google is superior now. I just need a better search term. Where did that go? There it is. Do I have any recommendations? Hopefully that helps. Seems like a good resource. What's next? What's the difference between Object.assign and yeah? Let's do it. Nice little code example. Yeah, you're welcome, man. Let's write some code. So this is a great question from Nookie Poo. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's a good question. It'll be a nice little exercise. We'll also talk. I mean, in this case, it kind of gets down to the object that you end up with, right? So this question comes from Nookie Poo. And what is the difference between Object.assign and Object-object? All right, so first of all, let's just explain what Object.assign is. Yeah, we should use Quokka. Let's go. Quokka. I think it's gonna work. It's trying. What's up, Akala? Are the questions first in, first out, or random? The questions are first in, first out, but they're also sorted so that supporters' questions appear at the top. And Drop Mania, thank you for that Prime resub. Quokka is having a hard time. I guess we won't use Quokka. Quokka. How do you spell Quokka? Yeah, I guess we won't use Quokka, but that's fine. Quokka is, it runs the code inside of your editor, but that's okay. All right, Object.assign. What does it do? It takes 2 arguments. The left-hand argument is the target. That is some object that you're putting properties into. So for example, let's say I have a person object that actually has no properties at all. If I say Object.assign and specify person as the target, on the right-hand side, I can specify an object, and all of the properties of that object will be shallow copied onto the person. So if I do something like this, name CJ, after running this code, person will now have a name property called CJ. So if we just log person, like that, person now has a name property. And this was the way to do this kind of thing before the spread operator was introduced into JavaScript. People still do this. It's still pretty useful. Trying to think about it. Object.assign is not a pure function. No. So, and the reason I know that is because it is actually modifying one of its inputs, right? So think of Object.assign as a function. Well, I mean, not think of it. It is. It takes in multiple arguments, and it doesn't return anything, right? But after this line runs, person has been modified. So Object.assign is not a pure function because it modifies its arguments, its input. Yeah, so it has side effects. But I can't think of any other examples, but this is the basic idea. So whatever is on the right-hand side, it's going to copy everything over and also potentially overwrite. So if I do like name Nicky Poo here, if we log person before this line, the name will be Nookie Poo, but then after that line, it got updated. So we're still logging person. It'll get updated to CJ, like that. The other thing is this object on the right-hand side can have any number of properties. So we have like favorite color is blue. Now person is going to have, so before person was just a name property, and then afterwards it has both of those properties overwritten onto it. One thing to note is this is a shallow copy. Meaning if you have reference types as your properties, those are just going to be the same reference. So for example, let's say I have an array of numbers. We'll call this fav numbers. And there'll be 42, 13, and 7. And if I throw this property onto this object here, actually, I mean, to be more clear, I guess, call this the new person props. Here we go. So now what I'm saying is take all of the properties of this new person and copy them over to person. But again, it's a shallow copy because if we take a look at person.favorite numbers and check to see if it is strictly equal to new person props favorite numbers, we should get true because it's literally just going to copy the reference of that array to this person. It doesn't do a deep copy, which would create a new array with all the new values. So if we do this, true, it's a shallow copy. Okay, so that's the basics of Object.assign. Now to answer this question, how's that different between this, which is using the spread operator? So let's talk about the spread operator, which basically lets you do the same thing. But you'll notice that Object.assign can modify an existing object, right? Like it takes an existing object and puts some properties into it. The spread operator, we're technically creating a new object here, which is fine. Spread is a like syntactic sugar for Object.assign, sort of. Well, let me show you. So let's try to do this exact same example with the spread operator instead. Okay, so we start off with person. We log them out. They just have a name. We have some new props here, and we want to put these props onto person. Now, right now with the spread operator, we can't really do that, right? Because if I mean, it won't work because of the const here. But if I tried to say person is now equal to itself, so that what this says is take all of the properties of person and spread them into this new object, and then also take all of the properties of new person props and spread them into this object. That will give us a new object, and then we attempt to store that back in person. Now, in this example, that's not going to work because I made person a const. But if it were a let, then we would have a similar functionality as before. We're now creating a new object with all of those properties on them and then storing them back in person. There is a difference here, though, because before we kept the original object. Before we kept the original one, we just overrode its properties. This time, we're creating a brand new object that has all of the properties of the old one and all of the properties of the new one. So if we log person now, we should see that that same stuff. So the question, what is the difference? I think the main difference is that Object.assign can modify an existing object. You don't necessarily have to create a new object to get those properties into it. The other thing, somebody mentioned it, somebody in the chat mentioned that Object.assign actually returns the target object. So technically, you could say something like person equals this, but you don't need to because Object.assign modifies it. Yeah, and then so to get the exact equivalent, Salamini has it, because these two are different. But if you want the Object.assign version to be the same as the spread, then you can pass in multiple objects into Object.assign. So you could say Object.assign. We're putting everything into this brand new empty object. I want you to take all of the person properties and put them on there. I also want you to take all of the new person properties and put them on there. But now we actually need to use that return value because we have just this object created on the fly. And if we want to actually hold on to it, we could store it back into person like this. So if I do actually, let me. Yeah, so instead of doing this line here, we do this. But if I do that, then person can't be a constant. It needs to be a let, so I can reassign it. What is this saying? Use an object spread instead. Yeah, my linter is telling me to do that. What's going on, buddies? What you doing? Stop it. Mods, if you're, I don't know if you did anything, mods, but if you did, I appreciate you. If not, take a look at the Twitch chat. Okay, so this should have the same behavior as the other one. The difference between this line and this line is that this line puts those new properties onto the existing object. This one creates a new object with the properties of these two other objects and then stores it back into person, which is a little bit different. Yeah, and s.code is showing another way to do a copy. Like technically that will do a deep copy, this one here. And is probably not something you want to do a lot because parsing and stringifying is potentially expensive depending on how big the objects are. But yeah. So what Zamar is talking about is what I was mentioning, a shallow copy. So they only go one level deep. For example, on the array, it's the exact same array. It didn't copy that array and create a new array. It just points to the same reference. So yeah. We got some support events. I appreciate you all. Let me thank you for that. Konig with the 2 months. Thank you. Drop Mania with the 4 months. Okay, not now with the 14 months. Hola, señor CJ. Un nuevo mes y usted responde preguntas. Good day. And Noxyboy with the 200 bits. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so that's the main difference. Hopefully that helped Nookie Poo. I think we should implement Object.assign from scratch. What do you all think? Type 1 in the chat if you want to see Object.assign from scratch. I'm going to do it anyways. Doesn't matter if you want to or not. Cool. All right. We need a function called, we'll call it assign. Assign. It takes in the did mods actually show up? I can't actually tell if they did or not. Somebody wants attention. Hey, Alka. Give me just a second. What am I doing? There we go. Okay, is Streamlabs back? I added it. I removed it, then re-added it. It should be back. Oh, I need to mod it. Let me try again in just a second. Oh, it turned itself off. Oh, you know what it is? Their toggle button is not that responsive. You click it and then it takes like 2 or 3 seconds before it recognizes that click. This is fine. Okay, where were we? We're implementing assign from scratch. So you may have used Object.assign before. We just talked about it. Now let's make it from scratch. So assign takes actually takes multiple arguments. We're going to do the most basic form of assign, where you have your target, the thing you want to put the properties onto, and then the other thing. Let's see what they call it in their docs here. Target is source. That makes complete and total sense. Yeah, so we're going to call it source. So where are those properties coming from, right? And because it's a shallow copy, it should be pretty easy. So what we do is we need to get all of the properties of source, iterate over them, and put all of the values onto target. So for that, we can use object dot. You could use dot keys, or you could use dot values. I'm going to use dot values. So you pass in the source. So object.values is going to give you an array of arrays, and each array has the property name and the value. So this is an array of arrays. We can then iterate over it. Like, technically, we could do this with a reduce. I'm just going to do it. Actually, could we? Yeah, we could. Yeah, let's write it the complicated way first, and then I'll write it without reduce. So this is going to give us the key and the value. And then each time we want to return the result. And our accumulator, you all tell me, what is the starting value of our accumulator here? But the simple way to actually put the property on the thing is just do result at key equals value, like that. Target, yeah, so if we start our accumulator as target, the first iteration of reduce result is going to be the target, and then we return target. So yeah, this is great. And then we really just return this thing. You're right. Yes, you're right, King Coding. This is entries. I got that mixed up. So object.keys gives you all of the keys, an array of keys. Object.values gives you an array of all the values. Object.entries gives you an array of arrays where each internal array has the key and the value. So this should do it. Like if we just log, I mean, we kind of want to do this business here. So we have our person, we log them out. Instead of using Object.assign, we're going to use just assign, which we'll call this function that I wrote right here. The target is person and the source is that. And then if we log person afterwards, it should have all those new properties on it. Like that. We did it. Cannot convert undefined or null to object. Yeah, so there's a lot of error checking you would want to do here to make sure that like the source is an object and stuff like that. That would create a copy, wouldn't it? Get the entries of the source, create a new object from those entries. Yeah, that just creates a shallow copy. This adds new properties. So like, I mean, if I have other properties on here, those don't disappear. Those are still there. So if the original object starts off like this, and then we assign this to it, it's a merge of the two. So the resulting object will still have a dog name on it, but it'll have those properties in addition, and name will overwrite the existing name. So if I do this, I gotta save it. Now, dog name stays. It doesn't get removed because it was in the original object. Yeah, and then let's not do this with reduce. Let's just pretend that never happened. Let's use a for each. And this is all we have to do, just like that. So for each key and value in the source, put it onto the result. And this doesn't, for each doesn't return anything, so we just need to return result afterwards. So this should be fine. Result is not defined. Oh, target. Target. Here we go. Nice. Yeah, if you don't make mistakes or have bad input, you don't need to check for errors. Cool. Yeah, and exactly, Terracon, if you wanted to do a deep copy, you would recursively call assign. So you could say something like this. We'll say, if type of source at, type of value is object or array. How does that work? If I do type of an object like this, so it's lowercase object. So if the type of the property is an object, then we're going to say target at that key equals a recursive call to assign. So assign, where the target is, oh, no, actually we'll, wait, how does this work? Oh no, we'll do an empty object. With the value here. Because that will create a copy of that, and then we assign it there. You would want to do the same thing if it's an array. Throw this in an else. Equals object, or type of value equals array. We've done it. We've now done deep copying. There's probably some other edge cases I'm not thinking about, but this would basically do it, because if we come across a reference type, we now create a copy of that reference type. Why is this complaining? Invalid type of comparison value. Oh, you're right. Yeah, because arrays are objects. Yeah. Yeah. So should be fine. This should work for 90% of the cases. Let's call this deep assign, which is different from just assign. And I'll show you why now. Okay, so regular assign doesn't copy the reference values. Deep assign does. So we do the assign here, and then if we take a look at person.favorite numbers, just like before, with the regular assign, it is exactly equal to the new person fav numbers. So this should print true. True, because it's the same reference. But if we instead do a deep assign, now person gets its own copy of favorite numbers because of this recursive call here. Though technically, yeah, if it's an array, we're now turning it into an object with keys, which is not exactly the same. Yeah, you're right. So we'll say else. Well, no, we'll do this. Yeah, I mean, usually for something like this, you might use like Lodash. Yeah, you don't have to do this recursively, but this would be really hard to do without recursion. And actually, I want to recursively call deep assign. Let's get it working at least for an array. So I'll say if array.isArray for the value, and we'll do it like this. And the way we're going to do this is just say value.slice. So slice creates a copy of the array with a given start and end, and if you pass nothing, you just get a direct copy of it. So if we come across an array, we just make a copy of that array. Now, here's the tricky part. What if some of the values in the array are also reference types? Well, in turn, we would want to deep assign those. That's where it gets tricky. Only works for the array itself. Inner reference types are not are still references. But this should work at the high level. So now if I do this, we get false, because when we came across the array, instead of just passing the reference, we created a copy of it to put on there. Okay, I think I'm done talking about this. If you had fun, or if you learned something, or if today is Friday, type 1 in the chat. And let's move on. Yeah, well, I can do this one really quick. Bob is asking about double equals versus triple equals. This is turning into a JavaScript question and answer stream, and I'm okay with that. One in chat. Oh no, I don't want that. I want to potentially make a directory. Yeah, we'll make it a directory for equality. And this, I mean, this is very relevant to what we were just doing. Sort of, because we were talking about references. Yeah. Oh yeah, good call. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of edge cases, but what Doc is mentioning is if the two reference the same object, then you probably should set them back to the new reference, the copied reference that you create. But that gets real tricky real fast. And Sure C Web, thank you for the 14 months and roaming with the 2 months. Thank you. I appreciate you. All right, let's talk about double equals versus triple equals. So in JavaScript, there are two types of equalities. I mean, actually, there's more than that, because there's also like truthy and falsy and stuff like that. Yeah. So, simple definition: double equals compares value only. Triple equals compares type and value. So this has no coercion. We'll talk about coercion in a second. And this will coerce types if they are not the same before comparing. We'll do it like this. Okay, for example, if we were to do is 2 double equals to 2, what's the answer to this? True. 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 Yeah, so the idea here is We're using double equals. That means it compares the value only. And what that means is if it comes across a comparison between two different types, right? The left-hand side is a number type and the right-hand side is a string. And so because we use double equals, JavaScript will be a bit more lenient and say, oh, well, I'll go ahead and convert this over here to a number first before comparing. And if you convert this to a number, you're going to get the number 2, which is equal to 2. Yeah. I don't think useStrict will fix that, will it? Yeah. useStrict doesn't affect loose equality versus strict equality. It does other things. But there's a lot of other values that can be coerced. So like, for example, if you do like true double equals 1, that also is going to be true because it's going to coerce the 1 into a Boolean. I believe it. Yeah. I think it's maybe it converts to numbers first. The thing is, there's an algorithm for determining how the types get coerced. So if you look at the ECMAScript spec, the type coercion algorithm, this defines exactly what happens when JavaScript comes across a scenario where it needs to coerce one of the values. Because it could go one of two ways, right? It could convert the 1 to a Boolean, or it could convert the true to a 1. And I'm not sure which one it does. I think it goes with numbers first, but you could read the spec and know exactly what it would do. But also just don't write code like this because, I mean, sometimes it's actually pretty useful to write code like this because this gets into the idea of like truthy falsy, where like 1 is technically a true value, like a truthy value. Like if you compare it to 0, 0 is actually a falsy value and 0 is going to get coerced to a Boolean. But regardless, that's the main thing to know when you're comparing these two. This will potentially convert one of the operands if they're not the same type. Now, triple equals, different story, and it's a lot easier to reason about, which is a thing. But if we change all of these to triple equals, there's no ambiguity here. It basically says, do these two things have the same value, and are they the same type? So immediately, these two things are a different type, it's going to be false. These two things are a different type, it's going to be false. These weren't even the same to begin with, so we're going to get false, false, false. False, 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 false. And so a lot of people recommend that when you're writing JavaScript, you basically use triple equals everywhere because this is usually what you want. You don't want to potentially coerce one of the values. You might get some unexpected behavior. That said, there is a time and a place to use double equals. Like especially if you're like on the back end and you're comparing a query parameter that comes across as a string with a number, you could use double equals. Also, you could manually convert the query parameters to a number before doing the comparison. But yeah. So that's a thing. Anything else I should mention about this? You could use double equals and 0 is false and not 0, yeah. Object.is? Let's look at it on MDN. Determines whether the two values are the same value. The two values are the same if one of the following holds. Both are undefined, both are null, both are true, or both are false. Both strings of the same length and same characters. They're the same reference. They're both numbers. Cool. Yeah, I have never used this, but it seems like it could be useful. I think the main scenario is like if you're comparing -0 and 0, and those you want those to be the same. Because I think if I do 0 is equal to, is this going to give me false? No, it gives me true. You could run into something there. Shouldn't you convert instead of using? No, I'll say for the most part, use triple equals. If you come across a scenario where you do need to compare two different types and you don't want to manually parse them or coerce them, because I mean, to get this working, or like to be more intentional, is I could do this and then do like a parse int here. And now this is going to give us true, right? Because this the triple equals compares type and value. On the right-hand side, we're actually converting that to a number. And so that's going to give us back true. So you could do this. That's probably what you want to do. You either want to use triple equals if you know it's going to work, or use triple equals along with some sort of parsing, and then potentially this if you really need to. But yeah, best practice is to use this. I still use double equals. There are a lot of scenarios where it actually is useful to let JavaScript coerce the types for you. Especially, yeah. No, I don't think it only converts to numbers. Because I think in this scenario, it potentially converts them to booleans. I don't know. We could look at the algorithm and it could tell us. But I think that's really all you need to know is this compares type and value. This only compares value. The other thing to note is, I mean, this gets into like reference types. So if I have like this A object, the name of CJ, and this B object that looks exactly the same, right? These are different. These are two totally separate references. And so regardless of if you use double equals or triple equals, both are going to give you false, because these are two different references. And this isn't going to compare them by individually looking at their properties. It's just going to say, are these two objects the same object? And they're not. These are two separate objects. So we're actually going to get false on both of these. False, false. Because they're totally separate and different objects. Now, if you wanted to see if they have all of the same properties on them with the same values, then you could use something like a deep compare, which gets into what we were talking about earlier with like a deep assign. It's similar, but you're basically traversing the properties of both of them and individually comparing all of them to see if they're the same. And there is no deep compare built into JavaScript. You'd have to implement it yourself or import a library like Lodash. I didn't know that, Doc. Yeah, this is another way. So this is kind of like a deep comparison because you're creating the string representation of the two, and then at that point you're just comparing two strings. But that is a potentially expensive operation to stringify an object, depending on how big it is and how many properties you have and how often you're stringifying it and doing that comparison. Recursive compare versus a deep compare. Those, I would say you could implement a deep compare with recursion. They're the same-ish. What was I going to say here? Both compare reference values, not a deep compare. Cool. Great question. Thank you, Bobhead, for that question. How did I end up choosing web development for my career? Let's talk about this. So I have a degree in computer science. Before that, I worked at a help desk and I fixed computers. I also did some Linux system administration. But basically, before I started coding, I was very technical. I liked tech stuff. I liked building computers and fixing computers and stuff like that. But I always wanted to be able to write my own software that could run on computers, which is why I decided to get a computer science degree. I still knew nothing about it, and I'll even say after I got my computer science degree, I feel like I still didn't know much about it. It's taken a long time of actually doing things in the real world to really understand everything. But my computer science degree, I didn't really do much web development. I just did C# and Java and some C++, a lot of bash scripting. Yeah, so I didn't really do much web dev. And then in my first job in industry, I was building desktop apps with C#. But some project came along that needed a web piece. And I decided to build it out. So I kind of like taught myself all the web dev stuff. And that app was actually written with ASP.NET because I already knew C#, so it wasn't that much of a jump. But that app was actually vulnerable to SQL injection, which is fun. So I learned about that and how to fix that. And then eventually I started to learn about like front-end frameworks. So I did build sites with like jQuery, and then I learned about Angular. And Angular was amazing and very similar to WPF. So WPF is the Windows Presentation Foundation. It's a framework for building desktop apps for Windows. But WPF introduced the idea of MVVM, model view view model, the idea of data binding. I was already doing that in WPF, and then I learned Angular. Angular was inspired by MVVM in WPF, and it brought like that kind of two-way data binding to the web. And so I thought this is great, and then I thought, okay, I can use my knowledge of C# to build APIs, and then build front ends with things like Angular, and then now this app that I wrote isn't just a desktop app; it can run anywhere. And then that's when I really fell in love with like APIs and websites versus like desktop apps and other stuff like that. Because the web is like the ultimate application delivery platform, right? Like if you've ever worked in desktop development or anything like that, it's a bit of a pain to get your binary executable onto some other machine so that they can actually run your code. With the web, they all speak a common language, and you can just load that app anywhere. So yeah, that's why I chose web dev, because it was really nice compared to a lot of the stuff I was doing in like desktop development. Cool. What's the difference between low level and high level? It's a good question. And it's a bit relevant to like the languages that I was talking about. So let's just write some notes on this. Access to memory, that's one thing. But let's talk about it from a higher level. So high level and low level. When we're talking about something high level, ultimately there are abstractions. Basically, something that needs to happen and potentially requires a complex set of instructions to be able to do that complex thing, that is abstracted away from you, so that as a programmer, all you have to do is like call one function or do one specific thing in a programming language, in the programming language that you're using that is high level, that under the hood is doing a whole lot more. So when we talk about high level, we're talking about some abstractions. When we're talking about low level, these are, we'll say, less abstractions, but honestly, there are still even more abstractions there. But typically when you hear low level, people will mention things like C or C++, or Rust, or any like native programming language. Yeah, or any other native programming language. Yeah, all the terms are relative, absolutely, because technically, even things like C# and Java are often called lower level languages, but these are actually higher level than C++ and Rust, because C# and Java introduce a lot of abstractions that allow their programs to be cross-platform versus this, where you're building natively. But what I mean when I say less abstractions, let's talk about this. So typically, native languages like this. But a lot of the things that you have to do in these programming languages, you don't have to do in JavaScript, or you don't have to do in C#. Things like manual memory management. So in C and C++, if you want to, for instance, create an array, you have to write code that specifically allocates memory so the array of data can be stored in there. And you have to know ahead of time what's the type of the thing that's going to be in the array, and how many of them are there, how many are going to be in the array, because I need to know how much actual memory I need to set aside. So yeah, malloc is one way you do it. I think C++, not I think, but I know C++ introduced like the idea of like smart pointers. So you could allocate memory, and then once it goes out of scope, it will automatically free up that memory. But like in C, because you wrote the code to allocate that memory, later on when you're done with that variable or that array, you will need to write code that frees up that memory. So that's what I mean when I'm saying there are less abstractions. You're much closer to the metal is a term that you'll typically hear. But in this example, what that means is I'm literally writing code that is either putting things into memory, like our RAM, or pulling things out of RAM. But even that is abstracted away because it's not directly the RAM. It's either the heap or the stack. It's abstractions. There's abstractions everywhere. But when we say closer to the metal, it means things like manual memory management. Yeah, people absolutely still learn C, and they're very useful for things like embedded applications where, let's say you have a controller of some kind that manages a pump in a field for some reason, or various things like that. Those are basically just little microcontrollers. They're not a full-fledged computer. They don't have gigabytes of memory, and they don't have like a huge hard drive and stuff like that. They can only do a little bit. And typically, you write programs for those things in a lower level language because it has to be very small and work within the constraints of that controller. Yeah, and if you think about like the Internet of Things, like smart things, like a light bulb or a toaster or whatever else, typically they might have a microcontroller. But if it has a touch screen, it's very likely that it has a full operating system on it, which means you can probably write code for it in higher level languages. But yeah, so that's what we mean when it's lower level. There's less abstractions and it's more manual work. And also, like C# and Java are technically lower level than really even, I mean, are they though? I think of them as C# and Java as lower level than JavaScript. JavaScript is a very high level language. A lot of things are abstracted away from you. You don't have to worry about allocating memory. I mean, you don't really have to care about much when you're writing JavaScript. All of that is abstracted away. The JavaScript engine takes care of all of that. Yeah, Python is also a higher level language. I would say like Ruby. I would say mostly any language that is not compiled. What was I gonna say? Or has a dynamic runtime. So yeah. Yeah, and that's another interesting note. And like when we're talking about abstraction, so like technically I can write JavaScript code that is running in the node.js runtime. The node.js runtime itself is written in C, in C++. So I write JavaScript code, but when Node.js is interpreting that code, it actually had to be written in a lower level language that can run directly on the machine to actually run the JavaScript code. But that's what I mean by abstraction, because all of that lower level stuff is abstracted away from you. All you have to do is say array.push, and behind the scenes, the JavaScript engine will handle all of the memory management and everything else. Yeah. I did miss a lot, but yeah, another term here is garbage collection. So in C# and Java, you don't have to write code that manually allocates memory for your variables and such. You just use the memory, and then it will figure out when you're no longer using those things and automatically free that memory up. That's called garbage collection. Yeah, technically JavaScript is garbage collected as well. So that's the thing. Hopefully that helped. Who asked this question? Thunveer. Did that help? Explain the difference between high level and low level. And this is in the context of programming languages, but I think we come across this concept of high level and low level a lot, like all over computer science, not just programming languages themselves. It's really the idea of either more or less abstraction. Like how far away from you are you away from where are the zeros and ones? Are you right next to the zeros and ones? Are you like 100 levels behind the zeros and ones? Yeah. Does a dynamic runtime influence performance of high-level languages? It can, but you would be amazed at how fast things can be in JavaScript because of all of the optimizations that they've done in the node.js runtime and like the V8 JavaScript compiler. Like you can get some really good performance there. But yes, like the more levels of abstraction that you introduce, potentially the less performance you might get, but it really depends. I'll say also, like with a Node.js program, it's possible to interop. So you could actually write code in a low-level language and interop that with a JavaScript program. You can do the same thing with like Python. So yeah. I'm centimeters away from my motherboard. Exactly. Yeah, you're closer to the metal. Yeah, Plexical is saying Node.js is insanely fast. The event loop model, it turned out to be stupid good for I/O stuff. Yeah. Why is Sublime faster than VS Code? I don't know. I mean, VS Code is pretty fast for me. Yeah, and Doc is saying high level usually implies you're agnostic of what's going on at the lower level. Yeah, so like when I'm writing my JavaScript code to run on a web page, I don't care how it decides to manage the memory, just as long as it works. So yeah, your JS code might be running on Node, V8, libuv, but it could also run on GraalVM or Java or some future stack that implements the ECMAScript specification. Yeah. So this gets into the idea that like ECMAScript, which is the specification for the JavaScript language, describes how the language should work and all of the features of it. And web browsers typically will create a JavaScript engine that aligns with that specification. But technically, you could have a Java runtime that also knows how to run JavaScript programs, or a C# runtime similarly. Yeah. Have I worked in large projects in lower level languages? No, I mean the C#. So in my first job after college, I did a whole lot of C# code and worked on some really big code bases, but I'm not really any big code bases in like C or C++ or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah. And so it is interesting because like when I got a computer science degree, I learned C and C++ and I learned about low-level memory management. So it is interesting to know about those things, but it's also really nice to not have to do those things because it's a lot of tedious code. Whereas higher level languages, there's less tedium at the potential cost of performance. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's keep moving. Haven is asking, is there a meaningful difference between Vue 3 and Vue 2? I just landed my first job as a dev. Congrats. I started learning Vue 3 and only just realized that at work they use Vue 2. I already learned a lot about Vue 3. Will the knowledge transfer over easily to Vue 2? Are there a lot of breaking changes? Now say, number one, there are not a lot of breaking changes. Number two, most everything you know about components in Vue 2 still works in Vue 3. So your data prop, your lifecycle methods, your computed properties, all of that can be done the exact same way in Vue 3. The major difference with Vue 3 is that Vue 3 also introduces the composition API, which not replaces, but is an option that you can use instead of the options API. So basically, if you only learned the composition API with Vue 3, all of those concepts you learned, like computed properties and different things like that, that'll still transfer over, but you will have to learn the options but yeah. All of the breaking changes that were introduced have to do with like initial app setup, and there are like a few other things, but it's for your day-to-day coding and your actual components. There are no real serious breaking changes between them. Yeah, and that's another point. If you want to use composition API style stuff in Vue 2, they have a library that you can install, so you don't even need to have Vue 3 to be able to use the composition API stuff. So, yeah. All right. I already answered Thanvir's question, so maybe we'll come back to that. What can I recommend to looking for web scraping? Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this one. Wrathful Fakey. I have a ton of videos on web scraping, but they're all with JavaScript, which is actually really nice for web scraping because you're typically dealing with like selecting elements and stuff like that, and there's a lot of JavaScript libraries you can use on the back end for like selecting elements. But if you search all across all my videos for scrap, you'll find a bunch of web scraping videos. Man, I kind of feel like scraping the web right now, so we could probably do that. I mean, honestly, it would actually be fun to try and do it with C#. But yeah, there were a lot of different haircuts, weren't there? Green hair, mid-size hair, wearing a hat hair, long hair, and then this hair. Yeah, Puppeteer is one thing you can use. I've actually never used it in any of my scraping project because it's slow. I mean, it's usable, but Puppeteer spins up an actual browser and will actually navigate to the pages and click them, and it loads all of the JavaScript and everything else. Whereas the way I typically scrape is I just make an HTTP request, get back the response, and then use a JavaScript library to pick out the pieces from it rather than having to actually run the JavaScript on the page. Yeah, I'm going to keep your question here because honestly, it would be fun to write a little thing with C# right now that did some web scraping. Yeah. Is it better to know multiple languages than one? I'll say learning multiple languages will help with your problem solving because most every programming language is like good for certain things, whereas other programming languages are good for other things. And if you learn them, you can learn the concepts and ideas behind that specific language, and it might inspire you when you're working in some other language. So I think it's a good thing. I'll say for beginners, it can get really confusing if you're trying to learn a lot at the same time. But if let's say you're pretty solid in your JavaScript, I would say it's worth it to learn something like learn a statically typed language like C# or Java to know what you're missing. So yeah. Best bang for buck laptop for learning web dev. I have no idea. I will say that these days, you can just do everything in the browser. So as long as you have enough RAM to run Google Chrome or Firefox, you can pretty much do everything you need. Because there's like code spaces. Is that what it's called? GitHub code spaces. That's one thing. Code Sandbox is the other one. There's also like Cloud9. Basically, there are ways to write and edit code directly in the web browser without really even needing decent hardware. Gitpods is another one. Yeah. So I'll say like that's one thing to say here is like you could spend a whole lot of money on a laptop, or you could get like a Chromebook and then just do all of your development in the browser. It might not be the most ideal, but you can make it work. You can make it work on a budget. I'll say if you're trying to do other things, then like let's say you're a music producer, or let's say you like to play games, get a computer that works well for one of those other things, and it'll work just fine for web development. That's my answer. Have I ever used Apache Cordova? A long time ago. And actually, Ionic, which I have used, has a way of adding Cordova plugins to your app. But they no longer do. So the preferred way these days to use Capacitor, which is very similar to Cordova, but it's just a whole new implementation. But basically what these are libraries that allow you to write JavaScript that potentially does native things on a mobile device. So you'll have a Cordova plugin that gives you access to GPS coordinates, or you'll have a Cordova plugin that gives you access to the camera directly. And you yourself could write Cordova plugins or capacitor plugins that do the native stuff. So you would have to write the plugin in, let's say, Java or Kotlin if you want it to work for Android, or you write that same plugin in Swift or Objective-C if you want it to work for iOS, and then you have the bridge that lets you write JavaScript. Thank you, Vidar. I can never hear breathing. Okay, we've gotten some support events. I appreciate you. Penners with the Prime, thank you. Bobhead with 100 bits, Rate with 100 bits, and Unfair with the 14 months. Thank you very much. How to set proxies, what is their use? Can you clarify, Yash? What kind of proxy are you talking about? What advice would I give to a new dev? Run. I don't know. I'm pretty burnt out and jaded right now, I guess I would say. I've been in the industry for like over 10 years. Yeah, okay, here's my advice. Be persistent. Like that, if anything, the reason I am successful in my career is because I was extremely persistent. Like if my code didn't work, I did everything in my power to figure out how to get it to work. If something was broken, I did everything in my power to get it working. I didn't just never give up, never surrender. That's my advice for a new dev. Cool. What do I think about Flutter and Dart? I've only built like sample projects with it. It seems fine. I think because myself, I am a web developer, I'm more comfortable using something like Ionic or even React Native. But Flutter seems fine. I think if I didn't want to use web dev tech, I might use something like that. Yash, what are you doing? You're asking all these blank questions. Yeah, I use VS Code to edit my stuff. Cool. I have been live for a little over an hour. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to scrape the web with C#. I apologize if I didn't get to your questions. But this actually sounds like a fun little challenge, because normally I scrape the web with JavaScript. So if you want to see me scrape the web with C#, type 1 in chat. If you don't, then leave, because that's what I'm doing. This could be fun. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna do our best. Type 1 or leave. Okay. First of all, I mean, we're just going to do some basic scraping. So like a classic example that's pretty innocuous, like we're not going to bring down any server, is if we scrape the list of US states from Wikipedia. So I guess I could have searched for United States. But if you look at this Wikipedia page, there is a table of all the states somewhere. We'll find it. List of US states. List of states and territories of the United States. Here we go. Okay, so here's the deal. This is a server-rendered web page. If we look at the source code of this Wikipedia page, we are going to come across an actual HTML table. See, these are table columns and table rows that has all of that data in it, right? it's technically here, but it's here. Now, this data isn't exactly consumable. So if I wanted to build an app that shows all the US states like in a dropdown or something like that, there's no real easy way to get this data from the page without doing something like scraping. So that's what the plan is here. We're going to write some C# code that we'll probably build an API. We'll have an API where I can make a request to get all of the US states, but behind the scenes, that C# code is going to go out, grab the source of this web page, and then write code to extract out all the pieces of data that it needs. So let's go. I'm actually going to go to, we're going to use .NET Core. So a few weeks ago, I built a .NET app. And in that, we have a ton of resources here. So like how to get set up and going. I'll link this here. I'm not going to do Blazor. No, this is going to be purely a JSON API. Okay, so you can go here to install the .NET SDK. I already have it installed. We need to generate a project. So I'm going to generate a web API project using the CLI. Yeah, so .NET new web API, and then give it a name. So we're going to call this Wiki Scraper. So this is going to generate a .NET app. I think it'll have like basic stuff ready to go. So if we go in here and I do .NET run, we will have just an API with Swagger ready to go. And we can start modifying it. Yeah, that's the plan, Dropmania, is we're going to look on NuGet and try to find a library for extracting stuff. Yeah, there we go. So we have our Swagger docs here. It comes with a simple controller that does like some random weather data, but we are now going to modify that to scrape the web. The first thing we need to do is we need to make an HTTP request to get the source code of this web page. Let's just get that working. How do I do that? I don't know. I'm going to search for C# HTTP request. I believe it's built in. I probably want to look at .NET Core. Make HTTP requests using HTTP client factory. Make HTTP requests in a .NET console app. Let's see. Yeah, so they create a new HTTP client. They can set their headers. They can say get string, and they go, yeah, this seems fine. This seems fine. So here's what we're going to do. In the code here, we're going to take a look at our controllers. We're going to rename this weather forecast controller. So this is going to be the Wiki Scrape controller. We'll rename it. And we'll get rid of all this extra stuff. So it had like a logger and all this stuff. Really, all we care about is the HTTP handler here. So whenever we get a request into this wiki scrape, we want to do the actual scraping and return the data. For now, this is just going to be an action result. Something like this. Yeah, and for now, it's just going to return. Okay. So now, if we restart our .NET app, if we look at the Swagger docs, we can now see there's a wiki scrape endpoint. And if we try it out, it just responds with a 200 status code. Okay. Now, this is where we want to make that HTTP request here. So in our C# code, we'll have a variable for the URL we're going to be making the request to, which is that. And then we need to make the request. What I found from this was they did a new HTTP client. So that's what I want. I want to create an HTTP client. And I need to use this namespace, system.net.http. So if I am now using this, and I now have access to an HTTP client. Great. Then with the client, we can make a request. So we'll call this the response string. And then we'll pass in the URL. So client.get string async. So it's going to make that HTTP request to get back the HTML data as a string. What else do we have? We could get a stream. String is what we want because we'll manually parse it ourselves. And for now, I'm actually just going to return an object where the HTML is that actual response string. So what this will do is when I make a request to the server, it's going to in turn make a request to Wikipedia, get back the HTML of the page, and then respond with it in a JSON object. So now, if I do this, it should take a second because it's actually reaching out to Wikipedia. And then when it gets the data back, eventually, it's a JSON object with a ton of HTML inside of it. Wikipedia's down? No way. No, it's fine. It's fine. There it is. Okay, yeah. It just took a while to load because of the way I did this. So basically what we have now is we're returning an object where the HTML property is literally the entire HTML source of that web page. That's fine. It's not what we want. Now we want to write code that like reaches into this HTML source code and pulls out the data from the table. How are we going to do that? I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. So NuGet is like the NPM of the .NET world. You can search for packages. I'm just going to search for jQuery. See if I can find anything like jQuery. I don't know if anybody knows of a library. Yeah, we're basically doing like HTML parsing or DOM parsing. Did somebody mention that? The HTML agility pack? An HTML parser that builds a read-write DOM and supports plain XPath. We could use a regex. We're not going to use a regex, though. I think we're going to go with this. Yeah, HTML agility pack. Can we go? Let's go to their site. See how do we use it. So create a document, load the HTML, and then how can we like select elements? Documentation, selectors. Select nodes. It accepts an XPath. Will it accept CSS selectors? XPath is fine, but CSS selectors are nicer to look at. Yeah, so this would basically be the Cheerio.js of the .NET world. Yeah, beautiful soup is how you do it in Python. CS query, an HTML parser, CSS selector engine, and jQuery port for .NET 4. This was last updated in 2013, but it kind of looks... and then the .NET standard one was released in 2016. This looks kind of like what I want. Forked from, last updated in 2015. Not actively maintained. Okay. Angel Sharp? Let's look for it. Or Angle Sharp? Angle Sharp CSS. I see. 2016 is old, I guess. 5 years old at this point. Explore the DOM. Okay. Selector queries. Full CSS support. Seems fine. Show me. Samples. Samples repo. queries. Demos, and then that is the app. Why is this so hard? Configuration. Create a formatter, create a parser, pass in the HTML, parse the document, and then from there we should have some properties. Parsing a well-defined document. Document manipulation. We have create element. It looks like it almost has like the full DOM API, like append child and stuff like that. So does that mean we have query selector? Yeah, we do. Okay. Okay. I think we can do this. We're gonna use Angel Sharp. I think we just want this one. You convert HTML to JSON. Seems fine, but that's just not the way I'm used to scraping. Because, I mean, basically, I get what they would do. They would basically take the HTML tree, like the XML tree of nodes, and then convert that to a JSON object that you can then just traverse with JSON properties. But I don't like that. That's not really how I'm used to scraping things. I like to be able to just select the elements that I want. So yeah, let's see what the CSS select. Let's see this. Just add the CSS selectors .NET Core. Oh, cool. All right, we'll use HTML Agility Pack. I mean, the HTML Agility Pack, if we look at it on NuGet, I mean, what did I search for before? Did I search for web scrape? Yeah, I mean, this was last updated 17 days ago, and it has 51 million downloads. Whereas the other one was not like that. So I'm happy to install this one instead. So we need that. We're also going to need the CSS selectors one. So that installed the base HTML Agility Pack. And then this installs the CSS selectors one. Okay, great. Wait, where did it go? I lost it. So create a web, load it, select it. Here we go. So we made the HTTP request. We now have the HTML. We want to extract some data out of it. And for these, we'll need to use the HTML Agility Pack namespace. So if I do that, we should have access to them. We then want to do, instead of load URL, I mean, that's actually pretty interesting that it'll load a URL, but I'm going to do load. Wait, is it that? Do I not even need an HTTP client at this point? Interesting. So that's pretty cool. This library HTML Agility Pack, this thing has that built in. So this will make the request, load it, and then let's say I want to get all of the table rows in this table. So we're here. I want to figure out what's the best selector to get access to like the rows in this table. So I'm going to look at the source of the page to figure that out. So we have a table with the class wiki table. And then I want to get all the table rows inside of that. Let's just try it out. If I do query selector all, we have a table with wiki table class. Wait, there's 5 of them? I guess we need something more specific. So I'm going to put sortable on there. Well, apparently there are multiple tables on this page. Yeah, because there's this one. Actually, that's not horrible. Because they're technically like territories, and we could scrape those as well. I'm really just trying to get the names. So this should be fine. So if I get all 5 of the tables on the page, yeah, the first one is there. This is fine. This is fine. So really what I want is I want to select all the table rows from inside of each of the tables. And that in turn gives us that. Why are there 2? Really what we want are the table rows inside of the table body, because we don't want the table header. So I want T body. So if I do T body TR, so these are only the rows inside the body. It won't get the headers. So this first one, nice, that's Alabama. And then if we go to like 52, oh no, that gives us Wyoming. For some reason, this table has the header in the T body. That's unfortunate, but really this is what you have to deal with when you're scraping, because not everything is in the same format. But here's what I think I will do. I'll just say, give me the first column of the TR, so a TD. Edit the wiki. I mean, I could edit the page. I'm not going to though. Wait, is it TRTH? Well, that's unfortunate. All right. We're going to get even more specific. Are you ready? So TR, inside the TR is a TH. Inside the TH is an A, and that A tag has an attribute title. Okay. Fine. But what about when we get here? District of Columbia. Seems to work. This is fine. This is fine. There's probably a better way to do it, but this is the selector that I want and need. This will basically give me every single row. So what's nice is this library has query selector all built in. So I can just pass that same selector. That should give me a list of nodes, and each of those nodes is going to be an anchor tag. And then I just need to extract the text out. So something like this. Nodes dot. We're gonna do a map. So we're going to look at each node, and I just want to return an object with a name property. So we'll say node dot query selector. Do I even want query selector? I think I just want the text content. Inner text. That should do it. So this is going to return an object where the name is equal to that. Something like this. And so we'll have our territories. How do you spell that? States and territories. How do you spell territories? Yeah, this is C#. We are working in C# right now. Great. And so now I am just going to return an object that has an array of territories, like that. Why is this complaining? HTML document does not contain a definition for query selector all. So I have to use the CSS selectors to get access to that. Okay, that should be it. Who thinks it's going to work first try? Let's take bets. We're going to do a prediction. Will it work on the first try? Will it work as intended without errors? Oh, no, this one. That was the previous one. So you have 30 seconds to vote with your channel points. Oh yeah, it's more than the 50 states. It's going to give us back like the territories like Puerto Rico, and it should be everything. But yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess I should show you the code if you want to vote on this. So the return type of my select is an anonymous object with a name property. I could create a class instead, but I didn't. I just created an anonymous object. Predict, parse error line 552 missing closed. It's possible. It's possible that when we try to load this HTML, like it doesn't load for whatever reason. All right. 95,000 points in the pool. I mean, overwhelmingly, people think it's going to work. Let's see. Start it up. All right. Moment of truth. Here we go. Here it is. Go. Well, I mean, it sort of worked. Here's the issue. My selector is wrong. I just need to get the right selector. But because here we have postal abbreviation, number of reps, Alabama, Alaska. They're all here. Legend. Yeah, I mean, let's say it worked. It basically worked. The better way to do this. Yeah, it didn't fit. No. It worked. It worked as intended. At this point, I just need to make a better selector. Congrats, it worked. Thanks for believing in me. Thanks for believing in me. I can make it better though. So here's what I'm gonna do. I am going to first get all of the tables, and then for each table, I'll look at all of its rows and I'll skip the header row. So, yeah, so I want every single T-body on the page. I'm going to call this tables. Yeah, as intended. Now we really want to like look at each individual table. Use the flag icon. So I think here's the thing. So right now we're just grabbing the name. Now that I'm writing more code, we can dive into each row and grab a bunch more properties. So that's what we'll do. So say for each one, can I for each it? I cannot. What do I need to be able to do? What do I need to do to... Query selector all returns a list. Do I need like the link extensions? How do I get for each on an I list? For each table in tables? I have, yeah, I am using system.link. how do I, what if I don't want, can I do that? Oh no. Well, the query selector all returns an iList is the thing. To list for each. There we go. Yeah. Thank you, username. So now we have each individual table, and for each table, I want to select all of the rows. So I'll say table.query selector all of the table rows. It gives me each of the rows. And then I want to look at all of the rows except for the first one or the first two. Why did they make this so difficult? So this is the first two rows. But that's in the table body and table head anyways. If I look in the table body, we should be fine. The issue is when we get to this one, the headers are in the body. How can I differentiate this top row here? And that's also tricky. There's two rows. You know what? I'm going to go back, and we're only going to select the first table. What would be the selector for that? So if I want only the first table, wiki table, how would you do that in CSS? Nth child. Zero? Like that? Oh, can I just do first? All right. I think we're just going to call this working and not do it the more complex way. Pseudo class first is not supported. Well. And I technically could watch me. Okay, can I do first child? I don't want the first child though. I want the first one. Nope. All right, we'll try nth of type. So the issue is I want the very first table and then all of the rows inside of that first table. Not the first row, but the first table. I don't know. Oh, yeah, you're totally right. Let's just use query selector instead of query selector all. Well. Oh, no. No, because we need all the rows. We need all the rows. Yeah, we need query selector all because ultimately we're selecting the individual rows. Let's see if nth child works. No. All right. Last plan. Are you ready? We're first going to get the table. Yeah, nodes at 0, basically. Well, no. We have to nodes at 0 here. So first, grab the table, and then with that table, give me your t-body and all of the A's inside of it. So instead of doc.query selector all, this will be table, and this will be query selector. There you go. This is the winner. This is it. Nice. Oh, wait, why is postal abbreviation in there? Oh, you know what it is? You know what it is? Okay, we didn't think about this. I'm looking at the DOM in the DevTools. Like when I'm looking at this, this is the rendered version of the page. It's very possible that the actual source code is not the same. So we need to be looking at the actual source code. See how they're doing it. Okay, we got a table. It's got a T-body. Ah, that's the issue. Okay. We need to skip the first row. Because there's a row. Wait, is there more that... the guy that wrote this page? Yeah, I'm curious. If we go to edit this page, somebody has actually written the HTML code here. Scope equals row. So we're trying to see on this first one. Yeah, that doesn't have scope equals row. You're right. Let's try it. Compiled. Go. This is why I use JavaScript for all of this, because it's a whole lot easier. Am I doing this right? Table, wiki table, tr. Oh, do I not need quotes? Well, nothing. Scope is on the th. It is. It is. Okay. If that's the case, will this work for this? Does that work across all tables? Let's try. Compile. Try again. All right, so we've got Alabama all the way to, look at that, District of Columbia, America Samoa. That was it. We just had to find the right selector. That's all. Perfect. We now have an API. So first try. But ultimately, like, I could deploy this to the web, and now I could build a front end that calls this API endpoint that now gets back this nice array of state names. And we could write more code that not only pulls out the names, but it pulls out the individual columns. As you saw, the hardest part is just figuring out how do you actually write selectors to extract it out of the page. But you can figure that out. Okay, that was fun. Some people were asking about C# resources and materials. I haven't published the video on YouTube yet, but a few weeks ago I did a stream where I started building an API in C# and .NET. You can check out the repo here, and then just keep an eye on YouTube because the VOD will be up eventually. It might actually be available on Twitch right now. Let's see. We want past broadcasts. Here it is. Yeah, you can watch it on Twitch right now. This is the stream where I went through like the basics of setting up a C# app. It has 10,000 views. That's crazy. Okay. I'll push this code to GitHub as well. It's pretty simple. Honestly, it's literally, we didn't do much. We just installed a library, but seems fine. Okay, I'm gonna go now. You all are great. Thanks for hanging out with me. We will do a raid. Yeah, the app was generated with the CLI tool. So if you go to this site, you can copy and paste the raid messages. This is our sub raid message. GG, Alka. Thanks for being here. This is, if you're not a sub, that's your raid message. Also, feel free to come up with your own raid message. Yeah, and thanks for all the supports. What else we got? Unfair with the 14 months. Thank you very much. Decallers with a 2-month resub, and Noxy Boy with the 2-month resub. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just lost 1,000 points. Doing what? What do you mean? All right, I don't know who we're gonna raid, but wherever we go, show them lots of love. Drop a follow if you like what they're doing. Next stream is planned for next Friday. I don't know what we're gonna be doing. More code of some kind. All right. You're awesome. Stay awesome. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And until next time, here's this. Hey, so we're going over to raid InstaFluff. He is the inventor of the drop game, so when you get over there, be sure to do the drops and enjoy. Have a good time over there.